Okay. Hey, Heidi. Presentation, so that way we can post it on our website. So if you feel like you've missed some information or missed a slide, you will be able to access it probably by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoy our webinar tonight. Also, there's a feature called Q&A in Zoom in this type of webinar that we're doing, and you'll be able to type in your questions all during the presentation. If we don't answer your question right away, I probably am saving it for the end. So just be patient. You don't need to type it in a second time. We will try to get to everything. Some questions I'll answer directly because they may be quick and easy. And please don't raise your hand. That won't do anything for us. I just need you to type questions into the Q&A section. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jake. So let's go back to do the little introduction. Yeah, so while we're still waiting for everyone to join, we would just like to know who's in our audience. So we have a little prompt here. If you feel comfortable to share, we would like to know your name, your child's age, and what brings you here tonight. So as you're sharing that, I'm just going to share a real quick, funny story on why I love this last question, because it always reminds me of a young, very sarcastic client that I had. I remember asking her like, oh, so what brings you here today? Right. And she responded with a straight face, a car. And we had a great laugh out of it. So as you're introducing yourself and answering the last question, please don't put my Zoom link or my computer. We want to hear what was it about this webinar that attracted you and that brought you here with us tonight. Okay, so I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Feel free to add your comments. So good evening. My name is Serena Nguyen. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a school social worker for the Simi Valley Unified School District. A big welcome to everyone and thank you for choosing to spend the evening with us. If you have joined us before, welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time, we're happy to have you here with us. And once again, as a parent myself, I understand how much planning and coordinating it takes to attend a meeting at 7 p.m. So we truly appreciate you being here with us. For tonight's agenda, we're going to start off with introduction. So you are familiar with who we are from both sides of the school district team and Daybreak team. We will have a mini icebreaker to set the tone for tonight's webinar. And then we'll jump into, the meat and potatoes of tonight with Diana and Brianna talking about typical and concerning behaviors, since changes often happen very quickly throughout childhood and into the teen years. But what are considered safe and healthy changes, and what are behaviors that we as parents need to step in and take actions. We will talk about strategies that can be implemented both at the home setting and at school, so we can have some tools to support our children as they navigate these changes. We will also review the resources in the schools. And at the end of the presentation, we will have time to answer your questions. And your questions will be answered by our panelists. So let me just introduce who we have here today.
Serena, may I interrupt for a quick second?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. We have somebody who's asking for Spanish translation who came in after Betsy announced how to do it. So if Yvonne or Betsy can take a second again and explain it, I'd appreciate it.
Muy buenas noches, muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Para interpretación simultánea al español, por favor llamen a la línea puente que es el 805-306-4500 y van a marcar la extensión número 4298. La contraseña va a ser 2258. Gracias. Lo voy a poner en la ventanilla de mensajes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll jump back into introducing our panelists. So you see Caitlin and Heidi. They are our elementary counselors. We have our Director of Secondary Education, Dr. Jerry Block, Director of Instruction and People Services, Dr. Jamie Snodgrass. We have Jake, who is our Public Relations Coordinator, and our interpreters, Yvonne and Betsy. Am I missing anybody else? I don't see any. I think that's it from the Simi side. From the Daybreak team, you are seeing some new faces tonight if you've been here before. We have Diana and we have Brianna, and I also see Sid and Trin. So I'll let Diana introduce the Daybreak team.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Serena. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We are really, really thrilled to be here and honored to be working with your community. So I'll introduce my role. My name is Diana Lay, and I support Daybreak's partnerships with school districts. Prior to joining Daybreak, I started my career as a middle school teacher and then transitioned into helping districts implement social emotional learning and mental health programs. I am joined tonight by one of our incredible clinicians who works directly with children across the district, Brianna, and she's going to be hosting this evening's content tonight, sharing about how we can support our students this year. So Brianna, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I hope everybody can hear me okay. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist at Daybreak Health. And, I've worked with clients with struggling with things all under the sun. And I live in Northern California, so my work has been done in Santa Clara County and Santa Cruz County, and I work with mostly immigrant families, have worked with mostly immigrant families, struggling with a lot of different kinds of issues related to trauma and life experiences.
Thanks, Brianna. Really appreciate you sharing that. We're also joined this evening by two additional members of our team, Sid and Trin. Sid actually is one of the co-founders of Daybreak, and you may recognize his face from some previous webinars. So he's joining us this evening, as well as our colleague Trin, who helped with Brianna in designing the content for tonight's session and really personalizing that for your community. And Trin also is a licensed clinician who has many years of experience supporting children and families across California. All right, so we thought we would take a moment before we actually dive into some of the content that we have this evening, just taking a moment to reflect on where we are personally coming into this space. I know at 7 p.m., many of us are coming from very busy days. We've been navigating quite a lot. Potentially, you've already had lots of time with your kids before hopping into this evening's session. So we wanted to share a quick little trick that we use with our team and with districts across California, where we ask the question, what is your internal weather report? And this is a really great strategy that you can also use with your own kids to sort of help them tune in to the emotions that they're feeling going into new spaces. Maybe they're coming home from the school day, and a great question is, what is your weather report this evening or this afternoon? I know for me, I'm feeling a little bit cloudy, but the sun is shining through because I'm really excited to be here this evening. So yeah, we hope that this is helpful to take a minute to just check in with yourself before we get started, and a great resource that you can use with your kids as well. Brianna, how are you this evening?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm trying to shake off a little bit of presenting jitters. I guess I'm probably a little bit in the middle with some little rain and thunder and lightning.
Well, let's hop over to our icebreaker today. We can dive in.
Hi, everybody. So welcome again. I am a parent as well. And of course, at 7 o'clock, my 10-month-old who is asleep in his room started screaming. So I hope that none of that is coming through in this presentation. Just throwing that out there now. But I wanted to, we wanted to start tonight with a little icebreaker. You know, tonight is all about getting in the shoes of our kids and really trying to understand them from their point of view and where they're coming from. So I would love to invite everybody to do a little mini visualization exercise with us today. So I'm going to ask all of you to actually close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. You know, I can't see anyone on the screen. I'm just looking at Diana and the slides. So we're not staring at each other here. And you can think back to it in your childhood. This can be your early childhood, adolescence, any part of your young life. A lot of what we're going to be discussing today relates to childhood, and it can be really helpful to ground ourselves and step into the shoes of our younger selves, so that maybe as we're talking about some of this content, it'll help relate to some of what our kids might be going through now. So now that you guys may have your eyes closed, maybe not, think back to that time, your childhood, adolescence, late teen years, whatever comes to mind for you. What images are you guys thinking about? You know, I really want to note that some of these images might feel a little bit nostalgic. For some people, they might be more positive. For others, they might be a little bit more difficult, and all of that's okay. A big piece of this presentation, like I said, is just kind of authentically getting into the shoes of our kids. So if you guys are willing to, I would love to invite and encourage each one of you to type one word that describes the images that came to mind when you're thinking about your childhood and your young self, and just summarize those images and those experiences with one word if you're able to do that. And I am not monitoring the chat at all. Are we sharing any of these out loud, or is it just kind of for parents to read through on their own?
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jake.
I was going to say the chat has a couple of words in here. I've got intimidated, I have playing, I have traumatic, insecure, alone, playing outdoors with my neighbor friends. That's what I've got so far. Hungry, carefree, some very strong words. Easier. Okay. Might be at the end of them.
Well, thank you so much for those of you that participated. As I mentioned, you know, we're going to see or hear experiences that are all over the place. And that's just like what's going on now with our kids. All of our kids are 100% unique, and we're going to see things that are all over the place, behaviorally, emotionally. And a lot of it is really normal, even if it's hard. And a lot of it is a little bit extra hard and could lead into taking a few extra steps. And, you know, I know we're all here to understand what's going on with our kids. So, you know, a lot of parents that we work with express a desire to understand what's going on with their children. Kids are very complex. Their moods are changing all the time. Their brains and bodies are developing. They may not even understand themselves sometimes. So we might not even understand them sometimes. And everything that we're going to talk about today, I just want to emphasize that every child is unique and may have different needs, and something that might be a little bit more normal for another child might be a little bit more of a red flag for another one. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so what are some more, you know, quote unquote, typical behaviors? You know, I hesitate to use the word typical at all, but there are some things that are not as concerning and that are developmentally appropriate for our kids at any given age. So, I want to keep in mind here that as we talk about behaviors, everything we're talking about tonight is on a spectrum. Behaviors, moods, challenges, there are some things that, like I said, even though they're hard, they're very normal. And then when we get on the other side of the spectrum is when we might want to do something a little extra about it to help support our kids. So we're going to see a lot of fluctuations in mood. I'm sure this is all something that we still struggle with as an adult. And this can be really normal. If we have a really hectic week at work, or if it's time to get all of our kids to school in the morning, we might feel kind of overwhelmed and stressed. We're going to have an emotional reaction to that. It is really normal for our kids to feel emotions and to express those emotions. We have learned throughout our lives that we fear a little bit more of those bad, unpopular emotions, like feeling sad, feeling angry, feeling anxious. But our feelings are giving us really, really important information. So that's something that I really try to get across to the families that I work with is, we're going to try to change our relationship with our feelings. Our anxiety might be telling us something important is coming up, or that a transition is going on. We're going from elementary school to middle school to high school. Those things are hard. We're going to feel a little bit anxious sometimes. It's normal to feel sad if something sad happens. It's normal for our kids to feel disappointed and frustrated if they don't get their way. They don't have to be happy about a rule. You know what I mean? And then we're also going to see an increase in self-awareness that's going to affect some of our kids' moods as well. Our kids are going to get older and more aware. They're going to become more aware of how they look, the changes in their body, how other people are perceiving them. And this may lead to some struggles with their mental health, not their mental health, but with some of the feelings that they're experiencing. It can be anxiety provoking to want to feel accepted and not being sure how you're being perceived by your peers. They might feel self-conscious and down on themselves, and that's okay to feel. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean it's a mental health problem. And then we're going to see a lot of really normal, challenging behaviors. Within a certain developmental period, it's normal for our kids to have tantrums. It's a way that they express themselves. They tell us that they're frustrated, upset, hungry, tired, overstimulated. I know that, we've all seen a parent, or we've been that parent in the store where our child is having a tantrum. Maybe we ran to the store after picking them up from their daycare and they're really hungry and they're really tired. And, we're making it through the day. It doesn't necessarily mean anything abnormal is going on there. It's just a little bit of the tweaking in the day and the basic needs. And then also we're going to see some interpersonal issues that are also really normal. Our kids are learning as they grow up to read social cues. They're learning how to share and negotiate rules. As kids get a little bit older, they're going to start learning some problem solving, learning to apologize, and actually have conversations with people. Especially now that we're coming back after this pandemic, we're seeing a lot of increases in kids relearning how to socialize and kind of reading those social cues and how to make new friends. If a child started kindergarten the year that all the schools were closed, and so first grade is their first year in actual school around a bunch of other kids, we're going to see them adjusting a little bit differently, perhaps. But that doesn't necessarily mean that anything very serious is going on there, or that there is any kind of mental health issue at all. We're also going to see some increased individuation with our kids as they start to get older. They start to achieve a sense of individuality and differentiate their identities from ours as parents. When our kids are little, they share a lot of the same values. We do a lot of things together, hang out, go to the park, have movie night and all this stuff. And as they get older, it might not feel great for the parent, or maybe it does, but our kids are going to start to individuate a little bit and have their own opinions, maybe change their values a little bit. Maybe, their religious beliefs and cultural values are going to change from those of their parents. And those things can be really hard. And they're also very developmentally normal. And then, we might see differences in interests. When my kid was really young, they loved to read, and now they love to play sports or play video games. And it doesn't necessarily mean that anything's wrong, even if we preferred it when they read. And then we're also going to see some changes in relationships. So as kids get older, we're going to see that they start to really value hanging out with their friends, and their peer groups are very, very important. And then we might see a little bit less interest in hanging out with the family. Not always, again, none of this is 100%, but those things might not feel great. And again, super, super normal. With younger kids, we might see some changes like between a certain age, girls like to play with girls, boys like to play with boys. And then maybe it starts to feel weird when we see them all kind of mixing together and playing together. Or when our kids start to have crushes and want to start dating. While might be a little bit uncomfortable as a parent, we have a lot of new territory that we have to get used to. Again, super, super developmentally normal. Next slide, please. All right. So then again, thinking about everything on a spectrum, as we talk about concerning behaviors and more typical behaviors, we really want to keep in mind that when a behavior or an emotional difficulty becomes a problem, we're really looking at how it's affecting the quality of our child's life. Is it impairing any area? Are they having really serious social issues? Are they having issues academically that is affecting them a little bit more seriously? Is it affecting relationships at home? We really want to keep that in mind while we think of the spectrum for emotions, behaviors, mental health stuff. Something a little bit more concerning behaviorally, you might see changes at school, grades going down, kids skipping classes perhaps, reduced participation in activities they used to enjoy. Maybe they used to love playing basketball and then all of a sudden they stopped. Something might be going on there. We're going to see, while we see kids pushing boundaries, we might see something like lying or breaking rules, violating their curfew, maybe saying they're going somewhere when they're actually going somewhere else. These might lead to some other kinds of issues and safety concerns and trust stuff. So this is when we start to kind of think like, okay, maybe this is a little bit more of a bigger deal. And then sleep's going to come up again and again here because sleep and basic needs are super, super important. While it can be really normal that, kids, as they get older, they might want to push boundaries and stay up a little bit later, or it's the weekend, or it's the summer. We really want to make sure as much as possible to keep some of that routine and normalcy for our kids. And I hear a lot, I'm sure a lot of us as clinicians and parents see a lot that kids are sometimes staying up in the middle of the night. It's really hard to stop socializing. Maybe they have a lot going on in school and they're up late doing homework. Maybe there's a lot of people in the house and at night is the only time that the house is really quiet and that they get some privacy and personal space. And so they might be staying up really late. But this can become a problem because teens and young kids still need a lot of sleep and a lot of rest. And it can lead to things like affecting their mood, affecting their concentration, their ability to get up and go to school. And then some other kinds of things like their appetite, nutrition, and things like that. We might see some interpersonal issues that are a little bit more concerning. So this can be spending a lot more time by themselves or withdrawing from their friends, withdrawing from activities that they normally enjoy. That can be indicative of something going on as well. We might see things like different types of aggression, physical aggression, getting into fights, relational aggression, which can be more like gossiping, leaving people out, leading to bullying, things like that. That can also be an indication that something might be going on there. And then just respecting other people's boundaries. It can be common to see like, oh, I'm just playing around or I'm teasing this person or I'm doing this, but it was a joke, but maybe to that other person, it wasn't a joke. Those kinds of interpersonal issues could be a little bit more of a red flag that maybe we want to explore that a little bit more with our kids. And then things like addiction, which is not anything new, but our kids are in a period, or they're going to reach a period where they're going through a lot of new things and they're meeting a lot of new people. And they're going to get curious, maybe try to experiment with things. And addiction is definitely an issue that we would want to take a little bit more seriously. And now it's not just with substances like drugs and alcohol, but also with media. We see our kids on media all day long. We just had a year and a half of being on the computer for school. That made media even more accessible. So these are definitely things to keep an eye on. And then our mood, back to the mood. When is sadness, anger, anxiety, etc., concerning and a mental health problem? Again, we really want to look at to the degree that these symptoms are affecting the quality of life of our kids and they're functioning in different life domains, their academics, their school. It's normal to feel sad when something sad happens. If we're feeling sad every day for most of the day and it's affecting our ability to come out of our room, to focus on school, those are two different situations. Next slide, please. And then these are definitely even a step further, signs that might warrant some more immediate attention and professional help. So non-suicidal self-injury, we commonly call this self-harming. This can be really common as well. And it can be really scary and it can be intimidating as a parent if we find out that our kids are harming themselves in any way. And this is frequently used as a coping mechanism for other mental health symptoms that might feel unmanageable or might feel unbearable to someone. And people use this coping skill as to feel more in control, to feel something if they're feeling kind of numb, as a distraction to relieve stress or pressure. And it's something that we would definitely want to take a little more seriously because it's one of those coping skills that could potentially lead to other kinds of issues. And then suicidal ideation. While it can be really different to have thoughts of, I wish I wouldn't wake up tomorrow, or I wish that I didn't have to be here so I wouldn't have to deal with these things. And on Saturday, I'm going to do X, Y, Z and try to end my life. We still want to take it seriously. One can lead to the other, and those thoughts are still potentially indicative of something underlying going on. And then harming others. It's a step further than the bullying and the physical aggression. This is when, we see our kids maybe taking pleasure in hurting other people or doing something that isn't okay towards others. We definitely want to take that seriously as well. And then hopelessness and helplessness. This can be tied into everything we've talked about so far. When we're able to instill hope in our kids, that's great. When our kids are feeling kind of hopeless and they're feeling sad, that's one of the things that we want to work on. We want to help them feel hopeful if we can. Hopelessness and helplessness are definitely things that can lead to other kinds of these other serious symptoms like feeling suicidal or trying to harm themselves, things like that. And then we might see some drastic changes in nutrition and health. As kids are growing and their bodies are changing, I'm sure we've all heard of eating disorders and things like restricting themselves. Restricting nutritional needs can really lead to other kinds of health issues. And we would want to definitely, if something like that's going on, loop in more of a support team, like having them assessed by a physician and having them maybe participate in a group and connecting them to services. Next slide, please. All right, so how do some of these problems develop and where do they come from? And none of the language I'm going to hear is going to be causal. We're just going to kind of think of it as like they correlate with each other. And I also want to say that this is just one view of mental health and how problems can develop. I am not touching on trauma experiences, genetics, biological factors, substance use, medical issues, medical trauma. So I just want to throw that out there as well. And during this presentation, we're going to be focusing on our thoughts, and we're going to be focusing on how our thoughts and beliefs correlate with our emotions and affect our behaviors and actions. Next slide, please.
Brianna,
so a lot.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask a couple of the audience questions that came up as well before we dive into some of these core beliefs. So it looks like one question is, my son is 15. He is currently in a full residential program, working and transitioning back to school. My question is around my son feeling like his mental health challenges are his fault. He told the therapist it was all his fault, and the therapist didn't dispute this comment. How should I respond when my son says that?
Well, I'm not sure, obviously, exactly what's going on and what your son is struggling with, but a big piece to mental health and related to our thoughts is what we're going to talk about next is feeling guilt and feeling that our issues might be our fault, feeling that I have all this, my life is great, and I still feel sad, and I don't know what's wrong with me. Like I have no reason to feel sad, and that's one of the mechanisms that we're working with when we're working with our kids, is normalizing how they feel and destigmatizing some of that for them. You know, not at all that this is anything that happened in your family with your child, but maybe worrying about their parents and saying like, well, I make my mom feel worried or sad because she worries about me and she loves me. And that might bring on some of that guilt. So all of these complex beliefs that we have about ourselves, and just how they work with all the other symptoms that we may have. It's really normal for kids to feel like what they're struggling with is their fault. And that is something that we can continue to work with.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that transitions really well into your slide here about core beliefs and how that informs how we think about and talk about ourselves.
Should I continue?
Yeah, let's go on. There are a few more questions that I'm keeping in mind, so we'll make sure we get to every question this evening, but why don't we dive into core beliefs, Brianna?
Okay. So a lot of the personal and mental health issues that we face in childhood, adolescence, adulthood can be rooted in core beliefs that we have about ourselves. And this is not, like I said, true for everybody, and different clinicians conceptualize where suffering comes from in different ways, but this is what we're going to be focusing on for tonight's presentation. And these beliefs are learned, we're not born with them. So we receive these messages from all over the place, from messages in the media, from parents, family, peers, how we interpret the actions of other people and influences that we make. Like, I'm not doing well in school and all of my siblings are doing well in school, so something must be wrong with me. Or if someone was in an accident, they might start, or attacked in any way, they might start to develop a belief that the world is not safe and they're not safe in the world. So even though we, of course, do not want to make our children feel this way in any way, sometimes they might make inferences from comments at home, and a lot of the time it doesn't have anything to do with what's going on at home, but we're bombarded with information almost 24/7, and it has a lot to do with how we think. And then our beliefs and our thoughts are super, super connected to our actions and our emotions. It's like a little triangle, and we'll get to see that little triangle in a little bit. So our present thoughts are often rooted in the beliefs that we developed and learned in childhood, or the experiences that we had in childhood and adolescence. You know, we might start to feel abandoned if someone important, like a parent or partner or friend, left, and we don't know why. You know, is something wrong with me? We might start to believe that we're unlovable or we're not good enough. And this might show up in different ways and themes throughout our life. We might not even think of it that way, but maybe we don't enter into long-term relationships because we're afraid of someone leaving us. And of course, I just made that example up, but you know, it can show up in a lot of different ways. We may receive a lot of messages that we need to do well in school and sports and developing certain skills. So then we feel like we have to be perfect. Like, I can't ask for help because I'm already supposed to know how to do this. Or if we don't do well, or we get a grade that we weren't expecting, we might feel like a failure because I always have to be perfect and I have to do just as well as my siblings, for example.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here in this slide, it's kind of connecting a little bit of everything we've talked about so far. So I want to explore a little bit about how our behaviors and actions, how we may see them on the surface and how they may be indicative that something different might be going on if we dig a little bit deeper. So when we take the time and we take interest in getting to know our young people and we listen openly and try to understand them from their point of view, it becomes, we're less likely to make assumptions. we're less likely to use criticisms. When we make assumptions and we use language that might feel critical, then that might inadvertently lead to some of the cycle of the problem repeating itself a little bit more. So for example, we may have used language like this, or our parents may have used language like this with us. Don't be ungrateful, you have a roof and you have food. Don't be lazy, clean your room. All they want to do is stare at the phone. And if we hear lazy enough, or we're not as good as enough, or we take people's actions to make us feel helpless, we're going to start to internalize a little bit of that sometimes. This might not be true for everybody. So when we're making these assumptions in this example here, if this person is hearing they're a failure, they might be hearing that they're worthless or they're a disappointment, not using those words exactly, but maybe lazy translates into that, or you got to see again, I told you that I wanted you to get an A on this exam. So now I'm a failure maybe. This could lead to it affecting their self-esteem a little bit. Issues with self-esteem could potentially lead into other issues like isolation, not having any energy or motivation, which could be indicative perhaps of symptoms of depression. And then they're going to try to find a way to escape some of that and use coping skills. And so coping skills, we can kind of throw them into a couple different categories, the ones that are a little bit safer and more helpful, preferable, and the ones that are not so helpful and not so safe. And can lead to some other problems. Gaming could go either way. I guess it just depends on the degree of how it's being used. But if they're hearing a lot of messages and internalizing some of this and creating messages, thoughts in their own head, calling themselves a failure, worthless, disappointment, entering this kind of fantasy world might be great. They can create an avatar looking like whatever they want. They can be as strong as they want. They can win, they can lose, and there's very little at risk. This might, for someone who might be bullied at school, this might be a great way for them to socialize that is also low risk, where they can escape and have friends and nobody is on their back about anything. Yeah, and then when we have these core beliefs, our experiences, we start to kind of funnel those a little bit. So we start to take those negative beliefs and those negative thoughts and the things that happen to us, the things we hear, we pay attention to those because those make sense. I heard this other person talking about how great my sister was, and I'm a failure because I don't get as many good grades as my sister. So then they're going to start paying attention to the things that fit into that thought that I'm a failure. And they're going to start disregarding the things that don't fit into that. So, you might get 3 A's and a D, but because you think you're a failure, you pay attention to that D, and that D outweighs all those A's that you got. Yeah. Next slide, please.
I'm noticing that it looks like for a few families, they relate to what you're sharing as well. There's a comment, importance of peer groups is really big with my daughter. She's very sensitive about how her image compares with others. We also saw a question come in about Instagram, actually. A 13-year-old has just joined Instagram, and her parent is not sure if that was a good idea. What are your thoughts on the use of social media in relationship to what you're describing?
Well, social media is tricky, right? Because we can't 100% monitor what our kids are doing on the internet and on social media. They can have effects that are not great, just because we're exposed to so many different images and ideas that can affect how our kids feel. And then on the other hand, it can also be a great tool. It can be a way for kids to express themselves, to share art, to see images of people that do look like them, that make them feel kind of understood and included. And it's kind of give and take there. I think that it's more complex than just, my 13-year-old is on Instagram. I think that we're going to get into a little bit of this later as well, but, kind of what has been built within the relationship there with your daughter or son. What is it? What's the communication like? What's that trust like? And sorry, I'm going around in circles, but a long way to say that it's not as easy to say like it was a good idea or it wasn't a good idea. There are a lot of factors that go into your particular 13-year-old being on Instagram.
Mhm.
Is there anything that wants to be added to that?
No, I think that's a really a great reflection, Brianna, and I really relate to that. I'm seeing another question that came up that I'd love to ask now at this moment before we move forward. This attendee shared, my son is a 7-year-old boy. He is having a hard time with group play. He said it feels uncomfortable to go and ask classmates to play with him, so he opts to stay alone. Should I be worried about him? How can I ease him into joining his friends without feeling fear or anxiety?
And again, we kind of want to look at everything on a spectrum. And, I would love to hear a little bit more about this child in particular. I have a lot of questions myself of like, does this child get chances to socialize outside of school or that specific group to practice some of these social skills? Maybe practicing, but maybe playing with your child in ways of like, oh, you could approach things this way. Or, when we play this game, sometimes you're going to win, sometimes we're going to lose, and practicing some skills that when he does affiliate with his friends or classmates, I'm sorry, I missed if this was in school, he's going to be already a little bit more well-versed in some of the things that might be accepted a little bit more and less bumpy, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily to be concerned because, being a shyer child, sometimes it can be a little bit harder to make friends, or maybe even, walking into class with him and be like, oh, this is Blink. It's nice to meet you, Jose. This is my son, Blake. Have you guys talked before? And kind of helping break the ice like that. A lot of little things to try.
I like that. It's a good strategy.
Diana, before we move on, I need to ask for a moment. We have some people that came in a little bit late, so they didn't hear instructions in the beginning. If you raise your hand, that doesn't do anything for us, but at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom screen, you're going to see where it says Q&A, and that allows you to type questions in, and those are the questions that we're answering throughout. We will especially answer most of them towards the end of the program, so we can just kind of go through them. So please excuse me for putting your hand down. I have a couple of people who have their hands up, but please use the Q&A to go ahead and ask your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'm also sensitive to time, so we will get to all of the questions in the panel Q&A session as we go. So Brianna, I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, so I'll have you go on to the next slide. And just further connecting a little bit more of what we've been talking about. Our thoughts and feelings, our behaviors are super interconnected. We see this little triangle here that we use a lot when we are thinking about the school of thought and psychology and therapy. But here we're looking at this core belief again, someone who feels worthy or someone who doesn't feel worthy is going to take actions differently based on how they're feeling based on this thought. So, someone who is maybe struggling a little bit more socially, for example, and they don't feel worthy, they might not go up to someone and they might not ask them, you want to hang out, you want to go play on this swing set with me, because it's a lot higher risk to them. They feel like they're going to lose out. They feel like this person, why would they want to play with me? Someone who might not have that core belief is more willing to take that risk because it could work out just fine. It might not be about me. Just like up here, in these quotations I have up here. She didn't talk to me when I saw her at the mall because she doesn't like me, versus she must not have seen me at the mall yesterday. That's why she didn't wave back when I waved at her. Yeah, and I just want to say again, this is just a really general walkthrough of this big angle and view of some of the things that could lead to issues with mental health and just some of these more problematic behaviors that we might see with our kids. All right. So us as their support people, how can we help? As their parent, their aunt, their uncle, their teacher, how can we support our kids? Now, can I have you click through all three of them? It's funny that I did that. There you go. All right. So we really want to help form some of these healthy relationships. I think I touched on that a little bit with one of the questions that we saw earlier. We want to be able to provide emotional support, and this can look really different for all of us because of all of our relationships with our kids are going to be really different. We can ask them how their day is going. We can ask them how they're doing. If you're not sure how to get these conversations started with your kids, because if we're not used to doing this, it could feel awkward. It could feel awkward for us and it can feel awkward for them. You can literally put in Google, like, questions to ask my 15-year-old, questions to ask, to check in with my child to see how they're doing. And it takes all of that legwork out for you. It can also really help if you're open with your kids, if you're kind of honest with them. And we want to keep in mind we want to keep in mind their developmental stage as well. But, you know, if this is your 16, 17-year-old child, maybe sharing your experiences when you first started dating, or, you know, the first time you had a drink, if that's something you guys are struggling with, and sharing a little bit of your experience. And then you're a little bit more of this wise guide to them versus, well, I can't share any of this with my parent because I might get in trouble. And then also being able to provide a little bit of space when they need that. You know, some kids are good at saying, like, I need some space right now. And some kids aren't as good at that. If we're in a house with a lot of people or a lot of kids, they might not have a quiet space to go to kind of decompress and organize their thoughts and figure out what's going on with them. So maybe taking them to the library so they can do their homework, or taking them on a drive and getting out of the house and away from all the noise. Also, kids thrive with structure and routines and predictability. And this brings a lot of stability, and it can be really supportive. And I know that this can be really hard to do when we're super busy and we might have our jobs, we have our other kids, and we have our other commitments. But trying to bring in a little bit of structure and routine can be super helpful in forming strong relationships at home and bringing some of that stability and support for our kids. And we can make this collaborative, we can make it fun. It can be different for every family. I created some resources for you guys to take with you about building the structure and about giving directions. I think someone here is supposed to provide those for you guys. So I'm not going to get too into detail there because I created a separate resource for that. And then also just getting your kids connected to resources. And this can be, you know, instead of necessarily saying, like, well, my kid is always on their phone, maybe providing some extra things or ideas for them at home so that they can engage their time in other things. Doing an activity with them, getting them a coloring book, enrolling them in a community theater, for example. It doesn't have to cost money. It can be something free. It can be going for a walk, modeling by example a little bit. Those things can be really supportive for kids at home as well. Oh, and then also recognizing if they might have some different educational needs. You know, someone might not be completing their work, or they might be very disengaged in school, and it might not be related to their motivation or their intellect or anything like that. It might be that they need some kind of assessment to be done so that we can meet their needs at school, and that might help them thrive. Next slide, please. And so with all this, I would love for you know, you as parents to think of all of us as a support team for your child. You and everyone at home, people at schools, teachers, counselors, providers like therapists, doctors, we're all a team supporting your child. And here, you know, I just keep listing more ideas of things that people can do with their kids, or things that people can have their kids do, because it can be really, you know, sometimes we hear our kids say, like, oh, there's nothing to do, that's why I'm on my phone. Or we're just like, I don't know what to do. So again, Google it. ideas of things to do with your children. And this can be a really good building block on the relationship and just give you the opportunity to get to know each other. You know, maybe this teenage boy might not respond as well to just sitting down and having a conversation with his parents, but maybe he's going to enjoy playing basketball with his dad, and then they might be able to connect further doing something like that. And it can be super, super supportive for your children, for you guys to get involved in I know a realistic way, whatever feels feasible for each family. Getting to know your kids' teachers, especially if they might be struggling in certain subjects, getting to know who the supportive point people are at school, maybe where the counseling office is, who the counselors are, you know, being mindful of language and attitudes used at home. Kids are like sponges, I'm sure we all know this, and they absorb a lot of the attitudes that we have about different things. So that could potentially lead to disengagement in school. And then don't be afraid to ask questions, because navigating all of this stuff can be really intimidating, especially if we've never done it before. But all of us, and I'm sure like all of these point people at schools, love to answer these questions to get everybody's support. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so then just kind of to summarize and to build on it a little bit, I know we're running out of time, is just after you start this conversation, what are some other things you can do? So really try to understand what the issue is with your child. Help them be as specific as possible. You know, okay, so you say that you're feeling depressed. What does that look like? If you weren't depressed, what would I see you doing differently? Really trying to narrow down some of the issues that are going on and get as specific as possible. And then not being afraid to ask those harder questions and assess for safety. It can be really uncomfortable to ask our children if they've had thoughts about death and dying and wanting to hurt themselves. And again, a super easy Google search is to ask, what are some of those basic questions to ask? And normalizing that can help destigmatize some of those feelings that your kids might be having. And then when in doubt, use a tool. There are so many tools, online resources that are free, some that are paid, that we can use as parents at home as well. So this little rainbow arch you'll see at the top is a scaling tool. This helps put a fence around an experience so it doesn't feel so uncontrollable and limitless. For example, what I use with my clients all the time on a scale from 1 to 10. 10 is the most depressed, the saddest you've ever felt, and 1 is not sad at all. Where are you today? Okay, you're at a 9. Why not a 10? What would be different if you were at a 10? Is there anything we could do to get you to an 8 today? Little things like that. And then I have a bigger image later, but there are a lot of workbooks and sheets. These are ones that you would buy, but there are a lot of free resources as well. The little workbooks that you guys can purchase and use with your kids at home. And there are online resources that you can also use with your kids at home that are for free. And it walks you through some of the things that you guys can practice together. And then when in doubt, connect to services. This can be an assessment for school or with a physician or with a mental health professional. And then following up with that, you know, oh, did you have your first therapy appointment this week? How did that go? Are you going to want to have another one? It's not just that initial connection, but following up with them and continuing to have those conversations.
All right. I think this would be a great moment actually for us to do a little bit of Q&A. Actually, I'm looking for that slide right now, but I know we have an amazing group of panelists joining us this evening. Jake, would you like to jump over to Q&A at this time or continue with a little bit of additional resources?
No, I'm going to jump to Q&A for a couple of minutes.
Okay.
We'll take a break and do resources, and we may run over for a few minutes. So those that need to jump off at that time, I understand, but we'll dive in and see what we've got. Some are comments, but I think it still helps to hear them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is by Anonymous. My son is 12 and he seems to just give up so easily with whatever task he is given. He wanted to drop one of his classes, believing it was too hard, had too much homework, or the teacher is difficult. As much as I try to help him with homework, he still struggles. What else can I do for him to overcome this defeatist mentality?
Is that to me, or did you guys, are your other panelists gonna jump in as well?
I would love for Caitlin or Heidi, if you've got any wisdom, and if Brianna wants to tackle this, go for it.
Well, I think it's important kind of to like talk about where those thoughts are coming from, and also talk about, what would be the best case scenario if in this situation, and what would be the worst case scenario, and really talk about those thoughts that are going into those situations too, and really, explore what that would be, and also explore where those thoughts are coming from. Have they ever felt like this before? Have they been in another classroom where they were thinking it was too much, and really being specific, and maybe making a plan too. Do we need to meet up with a teacher? Do we need to have a conference and figure out, what is it that the student needs support in? And really trying to problem solve before we make a drastic change, like changing the class, and making sure that, we've done what we can to advocate, for him. This is an opportunity for the student to share his concerns, and then also say, hey, I need help. What can we do? And that's really important too, because then that can like affirm his thoughts, and that can build confidence as well. And I always believe skill specific praise is so important, especially in the world of, filters and Instagram and all this, because we're constantly comparing ourselves. So being very specific, you're really kind with your sister today. Like, thanks for tying her shoes, or wow, that was such a creative drawing. Because what they hear on the outside can in turn turn into self-talk. So, when they are feeling down, they might be, hey, I am creative, and they're thinking about their strengths. So I would say create a plan, reach out for support, try to understand where these thoughts are coming from, and definitely, we're not going to say, no, you're wrong. Let's just say, hey, let's figure this out. Who can we go to for support to get a better understanding?
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. I also just wanted to jump in and mention that, sometimes when it comes to homework and schoolwork and things being hard, that sometimes we just need a change of scenery as well. So, changing up where we do homework, or maybe there's a friend that he can work with, or your student can work with, so that it feels it's a little bit more on their level, because sometimes when we have adults or parents helping us, it can affect our emotions. So maybe it's something where we, changing the change of scenery for him.
Thank you, Caitlin. I have another anonymous question. Is it a concern if a 13-year-old is getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep Monday through Friday? My daughter is a go-getter, straight A, spends time at night studying. Should she be getting more sleep? Brianna?
While teens need a really good amount of sleep, I don't think 7 to 8 hours is concerning. I think I'm not going to quote this correctly, but 8-9 hours is pretty good. I think your daughter, I think you said it was a daughter, is managing things really well, really motivated, and also really trying to put some of those basic needs first by taking care of herself and getting some rest.
Any other pressing thoughts on the sleep for kids?
I was just going to share that you're right. It's recommended for like 8 to 10 hours for that age group, and then for kids 6 to 12, 9 through 12 hours. So, Caitlin and I, with our elementary school students too, sometimes they're yawning, or they're just like, they look so tired, and it's like, what time did you go to sleep? Like, and it's like 10 or 11, I was on my tablet. So for our elementary school kids, they need about 9 to 12 hours of sleep, and age 13 to 18, about 8 or 9, 10 would be great. But those cell phones, even me, I know I'm really bad at it too, but staying on those electronics, and something that would be good too is putting away those electronics, maybe an hour before sleep time, maybe even for the younger kids, charging them with their parents at nighttime, turning those tablets and electronics in and not taking them to their room. So you have an idea that they're probably bored and not up on the tablet.
Which will bring me to this wonderful next question. It transitions perfectly from Gabriella. My son is 16 years old and he is very attached to his video games and spends all afternoon on his games after he comes home from school. How can I help him spend less time off of his video games and spend more time with our family? So some of those answers just came, but maybe Caitlin has some other suggestions, or Brianna?
Yeah, well, I think, some of the suggestions that we already went over, that Brianna went over about, creating routines and finding other activities to do. And I know with our older students and with teenagers that the phone is really something that makes them feel connected. So finding a way to put some boundaries, around the phone, or, we have, when we come, when we're at home, we're eating dinner, we put our phone away, and just creating some boundaries for your student so that they can learn to manage that. We don't always need to be, on technology. I know it can be really difficult once we've kind of formed these habits, or that's something, like I said, they feel connected. But, maybe finding some other ideas, having suggestions, starting small, with small amounts of time of like, we're going to do this for half an hour where we're going to spend some time together, and just building that in your days.
I have an anonymous question. My daughter's 6 years old. When she is having a tantrum about not getting her own way, often says she wishes she was dead. Her aunt is autistic and often yells this when she is having a meltdown. We are wondering if this is harmful for our daughter or if she is just mimicking.
Well, I think I would probably first explain to her a little bit, what Aunt is going through, and, just so she might see an adult and think that's an adult reaction. And so letting her understand, that, a little bit more about what Aunt is going through, and some of the challenges she might be having. And also, talking to her, what does it mean when you say you want to be dead? What does it mean to die? So really understand her thought process. And then asking her, if she does say she wants to die, then you're going to ask, how would you die? To see if there's a plan. If she has means, that's going to let us know if that's more serious, and then we really do need to support with that. Really making a safety plan and making sure that she doesn't have access to these things, and getting more support. But if she says, no, I don't want to die, it's just what I hear. Okay, so then it's about replacing those statements. So, okay, well, how are you feeling when you say that? I feel mad. Okay, we can say I feel mad. And then we can problem solve. What can we do? So it's really replacing those statements, but it's first kind of understanding where she's coming from.
We are at 8:02 and I want to be respectful of time, but I also want to be able to answer the handful of questions that we still have. So I'm going to ask if we can advance the slide to some of the resources so that our families can see them. And we wanted to talk briefly about what resources we have here in the district. And they include our amazing counselors. We have counselors at the elementary schools. We have counselors at the secondary schools. There are on the website for the district, there is a whole section on mental health and student wellness, and connections to those counselors are there, and also directly at your school sites. So please use our counselors. Can you go to the next slide? And then Daybreak Health is our partner with providing some mental health services for our students as needed on a referral basis. Somebody had asked about this. And you would also be speaking to our counselors to access some of those services. So I'm going to continue on for a few minutes to try to answer the questions that we have here. And if you are okay to drop off as a participant, please feel free to, and thank you for being here. But we will be posting this on the district website tomorrow towards the end of the day, and I will have the slide deck as well. So these resources will be there so you can access them. You don't have to memorize them or quickly take a screenshot. So if you're going to drop off, thank you very much. But for those who are going to stay on, there are really some good questions on here. I'm going to dive into the next one, unless anybody has something that I forgot to say that they want to fill in. Okay, here we go. Another anonymous one. When my daughter doesn't get her own way, or when she is feeling really on edge, she can't handle things like the way we say words with the letter K, and she will lash out at us. Is this just controlling behavior? I know it's not a ton of information, but
Sometimes we talk about things in our control and things outside of our control. So kind of trying to understand, I can control what I say, what I think, what I do, how I help myself. But then there's things outside of my control, like the weather. I can't control that. I can't control what people say, what people do. I can only control how I deal with that. So really helping her understand what's in her circles of control. And then when she does get upset, say, is that something in your control or out of your control? And then tell her, okay, so what's something you can do right now for yourself to control your feeling? But that's sometimes, maybe getting a little bit more information, but that would be one way of approaching it.
Amy has asked, she says, have tried involving my child in organized sports several times and it doesn't seem to stick. What are your thoughts on the importance of these types of activities?
I'll just jump in and say that I think sports and extracurricular activities are really important. But if your child is not interested in organized sports, maybe there's something else that they are interested in. And maybe it's just being involved in something else outside of school that's extracurricular. So, as much as we want them to maybe be part of those organized sports, maybe ask them what they would like to do. Maybe they have an option, pick between one or two of these activities, and you get to choose, so that they have buy-in, so that they're more involved in the decision making, and then what they're involved in after school.
And something I would love to add to that is kind of exploring with them a little bit exploring with yourself as well, like what you're hoping that they'll get out of this. Is it that they'll learn some camaraderie and get some time socializing with other people? Is it that they're going to be in a more structured environment where there are a lot of rules? If they're doing some kind of martial arts, are they trying to be creative? Maybe a creative activity would be something that is beneficial for them. So just kind of trying to figure out, what is it that you guys are valuing in the importance of potentially joining a sport? And if that's not of interest for your child, then maybe exploring those other interests and how they can get some of those similar things, like relating with other people, learning some of those roles, whatever it is for you guys, elsewhere.
Anonymous has asked, my 8-year-old is having increasing separation anxiety. Do you have any suggestions?
That's when we saw a lot after we're still in a pandemic, but when we came back from learning from home. And for some students, I think with being sick too, they have to stay home for a few days. So the consistency is really important to be at school. It really helps them feel successful. So, something that might be helpful is, maybe on the weekend, leaving your child with, a family member or a friend, so they can experience short moments when they aren't with you. Also trying to understand where those thoughts are coming from. Did something change or something happen that might have created these thoughts? Talking to them, or maybe if they even want to play with dolls, you can play with it. Oh, it's a school day, and trying to talk through it, and give them the doll, and they can talk to them. It's what's happening. Why don't you want to go to school? And kind of getting that insight from them as well. Sometimes too, Caitlin and I and the other elementary counselors, we read a book called The Invisible String, and it talks about the connection you have to the people you love. You can make a bracelet together too, made out of that string. And then that could be a piece that they take to school to feel connected to their parent. There might be more, other things there that could be more severe, but I would try those things first, and definitely get, like Brianna's been talking about, really understand where these thoughts are coming from. Try to understand a little bit more about that, because once we get insight to their thoughts, it's going to really help us support their needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that separation anxiety can be pretty normal for our younger students, and helping them, build relationships. If they're having a hard time going to school, maybe there's somebody on campus that they can talk with, or just build a deeper connection with, so that they feel like that they want to be there. So depending on where the separation anxiety is coming from, maybe, talking to them, letting them know they're safe, just building more connections with the people that are at that place. And then continuing to just remind them that they're safe and, that you'll be back for them.
It's a question about an older child. My freshman is having a hard time making friends this year, and we've extended invites, organized activities, but so far friendships haven't been developed. Lots of acquaintances, but no return invites. At what point do we take this more seriously? She is already to the point where she thinks something must be wrong with her and at times dreads going to school.
Making friends and developing social skills can be really scary sometimes, especially if we feel like we're starting from, if we're just starting out and we're kind of building up to get our friendships going. It can be, I know that it sounds like you guys have already been making efforts to help support her to establish some of these friendships and give her opportunities to socialize. It could be helpful potentially even checking in with the counselor and just kind of talking about some of these thoughts about if she's worried that something's going on with her, or maybe practicing some of these skills in the therapy room. And it's not necessarily practice, but the act of talking with the counselor is practicing talking and practicing some of those social skills and reading social cues. And then maybe even outside of school, trying to help connect her to some places where she can socialize and practice doing that a little bit more, where it's not a little bit lower stakes and it's not at school, if that makes sense.
My 11-year-old is very defiant and has been since kindergarten or earlier. We struggle to have him follow instructions like write legibly or show your work. And the more we try to get him to follow, the further he digs his heels down and nothing gets accomplished. How do we get through to him? And then before you answer that, this is a similar question on another 11-year-old. So I wanted to put them together. This one is, what advice can you give when my 11-year-old throws a tantrum and screams loudly when frustrated? So we have two very strong-willed 11-year-olds here.
Yes. So some suggestions just when thinking of, when students are frustrated or our children are frustrated and they're not able to function in that moment. It's just that's common, is when we're frustrated, we just can't think or talk or work out the problem. So it's important that we allow your child to calm down, and maybe that's providing, a calm space. They can go to their room, a safe spot for them to be able to de-escalate and do something that's calming for them, and then have a conversation after about what's really going on, and trying to get to, like we've said with previous things, getting more information, getting to the bottom of, what are they feeling? Like, why are they frustrated? What's bothering them? Which part is hard? So that you have more information as to what's going on, and maybe there's, some changes that can be made, or a way that you can support them. Those would be my suggestions.
And just to piggyback on that a little bit, I think I heard the beginning part of that question correctly, where it was also about like writing legibly or the way that they do their homework. It kind of sounds like it might be a little bit of a power struggle sometimes too. And, something that I commonly tell families that I work with is, pick your battles. If they are getting the homework done, maybe it's not 100% the way you want them to do it. But we're focusing on the act that they're getting it done. And again, I think I heard that correctly, but if we can avoid getting into a power struggle, it might help make it less heated, and it might get the task completed.
I've got two more questions. The first one, both are anonymous. My daughter does not want to play with other kids unless they play her game. She is very determined that she does not like their games and is sad when they won't play hers. We try to help her understand friendships are give and take, but she doesn't seem to want to give. How do we help this? Should we help her?
We see a lot of this at school and they're seeing it on the playground too. I think these are skills that, that being at home for 1.5 years, we haven't been able to develop these skills. So definitely playing at home too is important, and even role playing too. play like she plays and see how she feels too. You know, like change the rules on her and then ask her, how did that feel? Like when that happened to you, I didn't like that. And say, yeah, that's how other people feel too. You know, and did you have fun while we were playing the game? No, you know, and really talk about that experience too. Role playing is really powerful too. So having, and I'm not saying be nasty to her, but you know, just kind of like role play and let, you know, show her, because sometimes talking about why they shouldn't do something a certain way might not connect. So sometimes living the experience, because they're going to remember how they felt in that situation. So that might be something as well, playing board games. And I think that's important. That's important too, just having more opportunities to play with different groups and really talking about that. How does it feel when that happens? And how does it feel when, you know, switch it and play a different way? And also, you know, really establishing rules before, okay, we're going to play a game. What are the rules? And then you can add 2 rules and I'll add 2 rules. Are these the rules yet? And then continuing to play that game. And then once she doesn't follow those rules, you know, you can practice it like, we're not following the rules. This isn't fun anymore. And, you know, seeing and expressing yourself too.
I love this question. I am a single full-time mom with 2 kids. I feel like I never have enough time to care for all of their emotional needs. They go to after-school care and I do my best. What's the latest data on kids from single-parent homes and mental health?
I don't know if we have data, but first of all, congrats to you for working hard. I think that's the most important thing. You know, my own parents, they, you know, work, clean houses for a living, and they're like, we're not, you know, we wish we had a different type of job, and, you know, sometimes put themselves down, but what they didn't realize is that they were teaching me, you know, working hard is very important. Like work ethic. And then they started realizing that. And then they, you know, they were teaching me important skills that were, you know, you know, amazing, because that's what you're doing. You're working hard and you're letting them know that you're providing what they need. And then you're here at 8:16, you know, you're here on a Thursday. So you're doing it, you're involved. And I think that's important. And also, you know, letting yourself know that I'm doing my best and you're seeking support. And, you know, if you're feeling like you're seeing changes in your children, you know, communicate with a teacher and ask, are you seeing any changes in their behavior? Is there something I'm concerned about? And then the teacher, if there are, will let you know and communicate with the counselor. But sometimes we are not kind to ourselves and we might think, you know, we're not doing our best when we really are, because there might not be someone there to tell you that you are doing a great job. So just want to affirm that you are doing a good job, and you know, you have childcare for your kids after school. That's great that they're in the after school program. And communicate with, you know, with your teacher as well, if there's something else that they might be seeing during the day that you might not be seeing because you're at work.
I could speak as one mother to another mother and say that we never feel like we're doing everything that we can do. It's part of being a parent, I think. So I'm hearing a lot of, you are doing great things in the very short 2 sentences that you wrote. So mine's
And
20.
I love the saying, it takes a village.
Yeah.
Because all of us need each other and the support. And so, you know, there's support within our schools and our community, and even coming to this. So it takes a village.
Okay. So we are at the end of our questions, and we had a lot of people that stayed on to hear them. So I appreciate that. I want to thank everybody for being here. Is there a slide that we did with the dates for the upcoming ones?
Let me double check.
Okay.
I don't think, no, we don't have those, Jake, but we can.
Okay.
Can we
So,
send a follow-up email?
yeah, well, I will be sending it again to all the parents. So this is the first in a series of 4 that we have planned. We'll be doing them once a month. I believe that we're going to be doing them on the 2nd Tuesday of the month, unless something comes up on that date district-wide. So look for an announcement in a couple of weeks from the district about the next one. And we're going to go a little deeper into some of the issues that we have with kids and to try to help you as best we can. So I want to thank everybody again for being here. I want to thank our panelists for being here with us. I'm always so honored and humbled by how many people join us for these. This has been great. You guys have a great night. And again, our parents, I will be putting this up on the website sometime tomorrow. So you'll be able to access it by the weekend.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.